From nightmarish creatures that have risen from the ground to an anthropic future where we are driven to insanity, world building has been a consistent theme in my work. I chose this Praxis strand to further my creative processes and expand my research methods. During the first meeting of my Praxis group, we were introduced to many artists who created their own cities, worlds and universes. Some used these worlds to reflect and comment on the real world, whilst others created a completely different reality from their own, with its own people, religions, symbols and landscapes. I could feel myself being drawn to the artists who used their worlds to tell a narrative. For our second Praxis meeting, we had a drawing workshop where we were given the task to create a world. I chose to reflect here and look back through my first and second year sketchbooks. Looking through these sketchbooks, I was reminded of a previous idea that I could expand further during Praxis, my interest in a realm between life and the afterlife, a place where all enter during the transition to death. In July, I visited the Studio Ghibli Museum in Tokyo, Japan. It was an incredible experience and there were many aspects of it which excited me. One of them in particular being the story development process within each of the studio's projects. Ghibli director Miyazaki's latest film, The Boy and the Heron, has several unusual characters and multiple plots running through it, none of which are ever directly explained. This surrealist art style puts the narrative in the viewer's hands, giving them permission to interpret the characters and the stories as they wish. I began creating a story for my world, one which was driven by my inspirations from Ghibli. I allowed myself to write freely, pouring my ideas onto the page without letting myself feel the pressure of a specific plot or ending. This technique gave me a new sense of freedom within my art. I developed fully realised characters, settings, backgrounds and plot points quicker than ever before. Sitting with my writings, I could see familiarities between our real world and my imagined one. It was a blend between the known and the unknown, reality and fantasy. I wanted to create worlds within biomes, which would allow us to further explore the realms of fantasy that might exist within my creation. During my research, I was inspired by two books. One, called Heaven and Earth, Unseen by the Naked Eye, comprised of images taken from telescopes, x-rays, satellites, etc., and the other, The Universe, 365 days, full of a year's worth of astronomy images. I loved the diverse range of images in both books, and took photographs of the images that stood out to me. I began experimenting with them, freely drawing from the image, noting down elements, colours, shapes I could see, and using digital tools to layer and manipulate the original shapes and colours. I collated my experiments, creating mood boards for each of my biomes, lands, landscapes, and climates within a world all uniquely different but still connected. Using my mood board and experiments, I was then able to create finalised and fully realised designs. These designs combine my art with my writing, including in-depth details, set pieces, smells, and how it would feel to the characters. Taking these steps allowed me to visualise what these places would look like and feel like outside of a 2D sketch. The imagery I had created instantly reminded me of director Yorgos Lanthimos' use of cities throughout his movie Poor Things. He created a surreal and captivating universe, one where cities, although known to us by name, were otherworldly, each evoking a distinct mood and tone which helps to progress the story and symbolises the character's development and perspective on her world. Using imagery from books and films isn't something I typically do when beginning a new creative project. However, I found it very beneficial. I will continue to do so in my future projects, and I look forward to experimenting with the ways in which I do, possibly creating storyboards, collages and manipulating the physical image with mixed media. My crit feedback was to create more physical work, including more sculptural elements in my development and research. This led me to create dioramas, allowing me to visualise my biomes in 3D. To begin the dioramas, I made multiple grayscale drawings using the biome mood boards and development sketches as my key source of inspiration. Making these preliminary drawings in grayscale allowed me to fully divert my focus from colour, thinking about what I want each place to feel like and how I can use composition and texture to evoke those feelings and emotions. This process helped me see how my world would be viewed by others, and the many ways in which composition can impact the film and the viewer. Having built dioramas to visualise the terrain in my world, I then allowed myself to think further about the possible architecture and physical locations that could be found within the dimensions of my world. You can see in this time-lapse that when sketching architecture or structures, I tend to start with a shape, often either a simple one or a combination of shapes. At this stage in my sketching, I wasn't allowing myself to think about where these structures would be located, who would live there or what events might take place. My priority was to create a diverse range of architecture that could inspire more of my world and story. Afterwards, I did take some of these ideas and develop them further, planning what each structure may look like and feel like when placed within one of my biomes and how it could add to the story of my world. Character design has always been one of my favourite processes and one I am most interested in as a viewer also. I have always had a fascination with fairy tales and mythical creatures. When I was beginning to think about which beings would live in my world, I thought these tales would be a great place to start. I began my character design by researching, using books on mythology, folklore, and by reading tales across a range of cultures. I used a book called Creative Character Design by Brian Tillman to learn more about what makes specifically unique character designs. It was in that book where I read silhouettes are important in character design for one reason: recognizability. The easier the characters to recognize by their basic shape, the more memorable and less forgettable they will be. This inspired and influenced my designs. I focused more on silhouette than I had previously, forgetting for the most part about the finer details of the physical appearance. Tillman stated that shapes have meanings and can represent specific and important elements of the characters you create. I kept this in mind throughout my drawings, thinking always about who these characters are, their roles, their past, their personality and their mannerisms, all while thinking about how I can use the design to express these details. For my creatures, I kept my design sketchy, focusing on a basic outline and moved on to my world's heroine. When beginning to design her, I researched similar characters and used them for inspiration for colour palette, silhouette and personality. Throughout designing her and to protect her, I made sure to regularly compare the two, ensuring they would contrast each other nicely and the dynamic was grounded and deep. I was inspired to make models of my heroine, turning her into a 3D model and a stop motion figure. Both processes which I have always wanted to try after seeing Ali Ashman's short film Olivia Lumen. In this film, Ashman uses a stop-motion figure to tell a story, whilst using a wide range of animation techniques, including stop-motion, digital animation and paper animation, to build the world around that character. The mixed media elements of Olivia Lumen would also reflect well in my world, highlighting the diverseness of my biomes and characters. This world is something I feel very passionately about. I hope to continue developing this world and using it or elements from it in my future projects. Creating worlds and characters is something I have always found interesting, and participating in this Praxis strand has only furthered my love for it. I have never spent as much time researching and planning my worlds or projects before, and the time I spent doing so has been instrumental in my enjoyment of this project and the depth I have reached within it. I found the entire project enjoyable and educating. I look forward to taking what I have learned here into my future projects and using my new research and experimental techniques to strengthen my art.